we're on a journey, and it's not the destination, it's the journey, it's a process. And that's actually what a complaint-free world is. As you can see, each one of these tabs, that's what we're going to talk about today. How much time you got? No.
A lifetime.
That's what it is. It's a lifetime. It's a journey. And what I've talked to people about on this complaint-free world, they talk about it's the difficulty in the fact that, you know, they call themselves stupid, or they call themselves forgetful, or gosh, it's so hard, because they're trying to be perfect. And it's not about being perfect. It's about being aware. It's about waking up to our complaints and where we do it and how we do it. So it's an awakening, so don't chastise yourself. We know that you are perfect, whole, and complete in the eyes of God. It's only in your eyes that you don't believe you are. But you are. And so you're on a journey. And you're on a journey to wake up and understand how much you actually complain. Now, I'm in my 3rd week. And I'd like to brag and say I'm at 21 days, but no way. Matter of fact, I'm at my longest day. I'm in day 4 right now, and I have to tell you, I am going out of my way to avoid saying anything that will sound like a complaint, because I would love to be on day 5. If you know what? The reality is it doesn't matter. The reality is to become aware so that when it happens. And I have to tell you, I was on day 1 last week and the week before. I never got past day 1. I couldn't even get through a day. But you have to be gentle with yourself and know that it's an experience. It is an opportunity for you not to chastise yourself, but to celebrate yourself and say, I am so delighted you have the courage to wake up and pay attention to how often you complain, because it isn't the 5 times you think a day. It's closer to the 30. You'll find out by the time you go back and forth a few times. And I have to tell you, the first 2 weeks it was just 1 day, and last week it was like, I got to day 2, and I was so happy, and then it was day 1. And then it was day 2, and then it was day 1. And then I made it to 3, and I was so happy, and that was day 1. So I'm on day 4 today. I don't know where I'll be tomorrow. I don't even know where I'll be by the end of the day, and it's not important. The important thing is waking up and paying attention. So I say that as kind of, it's a fun way to become aware. And you know, when you wake up, it's almost like painful at first, because we do chastise ourselves. I don't know who implanted this gene in our heads, but I wish they would take it out, that we need to be perfect. I mean, I think I was 30 before I realized my mother wasn't still living with me, because she was inside my head. Because I was trying to be the best little boy that ever grew up, and I was a 30-year-old man. Hello? So it's about waking up. It's about honoring yourself and understanding who you are. Charles M. Sorensen says, by perseverance, the snail reached the ark. By perseverance, the snail reached the ark. We're in a snail's journey. And it's okay, because the snail made it to the ark. Just look in your garden. It's not escargot. Although I see lots of those. On my walk last night along the Harbor Island Drive, I was looking, all these little to-go cars. They're cars. They're not to-go carts. They're cars. They're all parked along here, and I'm thinking, is everybody renting these cars and staying in the hotels along there, and they park them there? They could be. I don't know. It's a great idea. So anyway, the thing about it's a journey, and it's not about what we're doing wrong. And today what we're going to talk about is relationships. Now, relationships can mean significant others, but it's basically about relationships with people. We're in relationships anywhere where there are 2 or more gathered. We're in a relationship. And we find it in work as well as in our love life. And we find it in our church. We find it in other things. And then we're also going to talk about why people complain. Why do we do it? If we don't like it, if it doesn't make us happy, why do we do it? There must be a payback. There must be some reason why we do it. And then we're going to talk about waking up. So now I've told it all to you. So one of the things about work, let me just say something about that. There's an interesting story in this book. A guy, a happily married man, went to his office and he liked this book. He saw the programming. He decided to work with it with his cohorts. And they started working and they started exchanging ideas about how you doing on it. What day are you on? How's it going for you not being complaint free? And what they noticed is they started to support one another and to stop complaining. They took it upon themselves, not in a chastising way, not in a way of being a bracelet cop, because that's only another way of complaining, but in a way of being supportive. And one night, he was home, and he was in the kitchen, and he was just found himself attracted to his wife, and they're kissing, and he says, have you noticed? We're kissing more lately. And she says, have you noticed? It's ever since you started doing the complaint free. Because she said, what you used to do is you used to come home from work and you would spend the first half hour, 45 minutes complaining about everybody and everything in your office. And she says, you weren't in a very loving mood. And she says, now you come home and you don't talk about complaints. You just talk about stuff that goes on without a complaint. She says, you're really in a much more loving mood. So if you think about that as a payback, why wouldn't you want to go there? Why wouldn't you want that? If it starts changing at work, then it starts changing at home. It changes your attitude. There are pros and cons to complaining. Complaining may bring social benefits such as attention and sympathy. Oh, you poor dear. Life treats you really poorly. Let me join your pity party. It's a benefit. It's a benefit. And then some people's relationships are based primarily on complaining. I've known people like this. They drive me buggy. Now, I know that's not you, but there are people who absolutely do this, and they kind of like one-upsmanship on each other, and they support each other, and they're complaining. That's what the relationship is built on. But a person that complains in such a relation walks a fine line because it comes to a point where it's so draining. Have you ever found yourself not wanting to take a phone call? You know, on our cell phones now, you can have caller ID, right? So you can either say you're busy and not take it, or if it's really intrusive, you just push silent. It goes to message. And you say, oops, I didn't see your call, when you call them 2 or 3 days later. But why do you avoid it? There must be something going on there that you want to avoid. So the chance is to look at it, to see what that's all about. Eckhart Tolle explains that everyone has what he calls a pain body. The pain body is that part in us that gets a rush from hearing bad news or from being in a confrontation with somebody. When I read this, I thought, could this be true? Could I get a rush? But what happens when you get in a confrontation? Are you calm, cool, and collected? Is there a rush? Now, I personally try to avoid confrontation. I have to look at that part of me and wonder why. But there are people that absolutely get a rush from it. So they seek it out. And so it's a way to do that. So usually it always takes two, though, right? If nobody responds, there's no energy. There's no energy. But if you respond, if you put it out there and they come and they're attracted just like moths to the flame, they come in, you're there. You've got your pain body experience. And that same thing happens to the news. I mean, I don't know. I think the sad thing about these beheadings, there are videos out there. People watch those videos or they wouldn't be there. That's a rush. That is a rush from a whole different way. So just be aware, where are you getting your rush from? And remember about relationships. I think we forget, why did we ever get in this relationship? If you think that relationships are really meant because you want some fun, and it's for growth. The growth is the ticklish part, and I don't mean funny, ha-ha ticklish. The growth stretches you. It peels another layer of the onion skin off. But who better than someone you really love? Because hopefully the communication is such that you can talk it out when your buttons get pushed. And in a relationship, trust me, I think they're going to get pushed. They just will, because that's where you're coming together. So if you can remember and celebrate your partner, or your boss, or your co-workers, your friends, they're in your life for fun and growth. So rather than cut them off, invite them in, because you're going to go deeper. You're going to go into it. You know, there was a thing when we tend to look at people in part of our complaints, and we say things like, my spouse, and it's usually directed at men, leave their socks all over the floor. You can tell where they came in the house because they start leaving articles of clothing all the way to the bedroom. And what do we say to that person? We say, and we identify that person as the person who leaves their socks all over the floor. We tell them, all you do is leave your socks on the floor. So pretty soon, rather than hearing that as a chance to change their behavior, they say, it's imprinting. It's imprinting. They say, she thinks all I do is leave my socks on the floor, so that's what I'm going to do. Where we miss the chance to do is we miss the chance to say, you know, I really love it when you pick your socks up. I really know that you would like to have a clean, harmonious house with me. And then they start thinking about what they want is what you want. And they see themselves differently. He tells a funny story in the book about Old Yeller. Old Yeller he identifies it with this group of women in Kansas City who would get together once a month at a Mexican restaurant, drink margaritas, and they called it group therapy. Now, the reason they got together for group therapy was to talk about the men of their lives and how unhappy they were and what dogs they were. Now, guess what? None of those women in that group had a happy relationship with the men in their lives. And why do you suppose that is? They thought they were dogs. So what did they attract in their life? Dogs. They got exactly what they attracted, what they expected. And so they were surprised when they said, oh, my husband is so lazy, all he does is sit around on a lazy boy and do nothing all day. They get home and old Yeller is sitting in the lazy boy. Why not? He's doing exactly what you imprinted him to do. He's doing exactly what? So your opportunity in as a relationship is, what is it that you want? Do you believe that a complaint never changed anything? Did a complaint about yourself ever change yourself? Really? Long lasting? Most complaints do not. Most complaints do not change anything. If anything, most complaints put up an area of defense. People take it personally when you complain. So a complaint doesn't change it. What does change us is effective communication. They talk about in there about responsible communications. Responsible communications is really, really important. It's adult communication. I say that, and yet I want to use an example of what my daughter, who was only 10 years old, taught me about adult communication. Adult communications is really about talking to the person who you want to affect change with. Not talking to somebody else, but talking to that person. Actually bringing it up, speaking directly to them who can make a change. I recently had an experience at the hospital where I really wanted something different than what I was getting. And in my old ways, I could have gone ahead and complained to my coworkers and complained to other people and said, I'm having this experience, are you having it too? Because we'd probably be enlisting support for our ideas. But what I did is I took the opportunity to say, I don't like this, I would like a change. Who is the person that can change it for me? Because I tried through some other avenues to change it, and it wasn't happening. So I did not. I made an elective choice, and this is not to speak or tout my own horn. It's to show you that there are examples out there that you can use. Don't complain to somebody who can't do anything about it. It doesn't work. It doesn't change anything. What is your objective? Is your objective to complain, or is your objective to get what you want? If your objective is to get to what you want, don't waste your energy in complaining. Go talk to the person who can get what you want. In my case, I went to my supervisor and said, I'm not getting a good response. Can you help me out? Run it up the chain. See what happens. And things happen. Things change. I'm getting what I want. Do you see how that works? So don't waste your energy. You know, when you do that, it just goes nowhere. The other favorite thing that I really like is triangulation. You know about triangulation. That's when you talk to somebody else about a person who's not present. I know nobody has ever done that here. I have to watch myself because people will do something that I don't really like. They're not present. And so I turned to the person who is, and I said, da-da-da-da-da-da. That is not healthy. That doesn't do anything for them. It really pollutes the person I'm talking to. They don't need it. There's nothing there. I was going to talk about the wisdom in adult language. Once, after I was divorced, I would have my kids on the weekends. And my goal was, no matter what disagreements I had with my former wife, I would not speak ill of her in front of the children. But I have to tell you, life happens. And that doesn't always happen. And I remember this one instance so clearly. I am driving with my daughter in the car, who's only 10 years old. And all of a sudden, something hit me, and I start to complain about my former wife. Your mother. And I went on, and finally, this 10-year-old turns and looks at me. I can see her looking at me out of the corner of my eye and says, Dad, if you have a problem with Mother, you should talk to Mother. You should not talk to me. Hello? That immediately hit home. How wise is that? The wisdom of a child. They get it. Children get it. It's the adults who forget. We forget the wisdom of our childhood and how important all of that is. There's another story in here about training. People tend to get in rhythm. By that I mean, they have an example on there, and I was going to try it here with Jen, and it didn't seem at the right time, but if you notice over a period of time, when people start clapping, even though we might start clapping out of sync, what will happen is over a minute or two, we will all get into sync, and we'll all clap in rhythm. The same thing is about metronomes and pianos. If you set a bunch of metronomes in and you start clicking them off at different times, pretty soon they will all synchronize themselves. They will all get in sync. I don't know how long it'll take, but it'll be, I think if you went into a music store, try it out sometime if you want to play with them. And drive them crazy! Go do all that. But the reason why that's important is you're in a group and everybody is complaining. And you can choose to join in and be one of the complainers, or you can choose to be different. If you ever notice, and this is about swallows, I think, birds in flight. And I was watching this actually it was on a YouTube thing on Facebook last week. These swallows were flying in formation. It was like this big black cloud, and it was moving. It was in harmony across the sky, and it was so beautiful. And as I looked at that, and I talked about it later, is what happens is it appears that there's a leader, but there isn't. What's happening is the leadership of the birds passes from bird to bird, and as each one moves and swings, the rest of the flock goes with it. So that beautiful harmony that you see is various leaders taking the flock. They're all going together. Why is that important? That's important because you can do the same thing with complaints. If you're in a group that's complaining, you can be the group that decides to be the bird that changes the flock. You can decide to start changing it. This is this great story. I was going to tell it to you, but I want to read it. Because some of you may remember this. Monty Python's Flying Circus. Well, and there was some kind of a skit in 1974. In the sketch, 4 sophisticated and well-dressed gentlemen from Yorkshire, England, are seated together enjoying some expensive wine. Their conversation begins with statements of shared gratitude for the successes, shifts subtly into negativity. And then over time, the complaining one-upsmanship becomes excessive to the point of hilarity. One gentleman comments that in previous years he would have been lucky to afford the price of a cup of tea. A second, wanting to outdo the first, said he would have been fortunate to have purchased cold tea. The others join in and complaining revs up. And then one says that his life was of the greatest hardship. One of the gentlemen tells of a shabby condition of living in a house as a boy. The second clicks his tongue, rolls his eyes, and replies, "House? You were lucky to live in a house. We used to live in one room, all 26 of us. No furniture. Half the floor was missing. And we all huddled together in one corner for fear of falling." Another one says, "Oh, you were lucky to have a room. We used to live in the corridor. Oh, we used to dream of living in a corridor. We used to live in an old water tank." Well, when I say house, it was only a hole in the ground covered by a sheet of tarpaulin. But it was a house to us. We were evicted from our hole in the ground. We had to go live in a lake. You were lucky to have a lake. There were 150 of us living in a shoebox in the middle of the road. So it goes on and on. But you see how ridiculous all that gets. But we do that. We get engaged in the one-upsmanship. Have you ever sat around with people and noticed that the complaints start and it becomes who can outdo who with the biggest complaint? So why do people complain? There's an acronym which I love, GRIPE. G-R-I-P-E. It stands for G is to get attention. R is to remove responsibility. I is to inspire envy. P is for power. And E excuses poor performance. So to get attention, human beings have an innate need to be acknowledged by other people. Attention from others makes us feel safe, secured, and cared for. We feel like we're part of the tribe. It's that part of us. The R is for removed responsibilities. It's what do you want me to do? I'm powerless. Can't change City Hall. My boss is so stupid. My boss is so stupid implies that you're smarter, and if you were in charge, you would know what to do. That's a complaint. Inspire envy. And then power. Power is about authority and privilege and ease. And it's about trying to get people on your side. And when I shared that story about my daughter, I think in the back of my mind, I was trying to get her on my side. And she wasn't having any of it. She was smart. So we try and do that. And then the other is excuse poor performance. We try to say it's not my fault. I used to have a friend of mine who was late, habitually late. And she'd say, it was the traffic. The idea that she didn't leave her office until we were getting together a half hour away had nothing to do with the traffic. We use something that says the reason why we can't do it. We can't do it, the dog ate our homework. Yeah. The computer crashed. There are lots of things that keep it. But they have an idea. You can be that victim, and that is GRIPE. Get attention, remove responsibility, inspire envy. P is power, Q is poor performance. I have a story in here that I think is interesting. Some of you remember George Foreman. George Foreman pitches grills and all this on television. He used to be a boxer. And in 1973, after being out of the ring for 20 years, was doing a comeback. And he was fighting a young guy in Las Vegas by the Duke somebody. I don't follow boxing, so I'm only reporting the story, okay? Duke had not lost any fights. He was up there. It was a thing about a world championship. There was 20 years difference between their ages. Foreman kept coming out round after round. The young kid would bob and weave and stay out of the punch and stay away from him because Foreman had a reach and an arm that would floor people. And back and forth they went the whole time. And at each round, the bell would ring and George Foreman would go back and he would stand in this corner. And people asked him later why he stood, and he says, because at my age, if I sat down, I might not get up. But what he did is, in the 11th round, when the bell rang, he went to his corner. And while the CNN announcer was saying, it looks like it's the Duke's fight on points, unless Foreman really does something different. His crew was telling them, you're ahead on points. Coast in the 12th round. Save your energy. You'll win. What happened is at the end of the 12 rounds, Duke was declared the winner. Now, Foreman could have said, it's my crew's fault, they misled me. He could have been a victim. He could have blamed everybody. He didn't. He didn't do that. At the end of the fight, he thanked Duke for fighting very well. He thanked his crew for supporting him. And when cameraman asked him, or newsman, won't you feel bad that your crew misled you? He just smiled and walked away. What does that do? It says that George Foreman refused to be a victim. It says he refused to complain. He refused to shift responsibility to somebody else for his own behavior. He was a minister of a small church in Houston for 10 years, and after that, he became a pitchman. And you know that story. So if you accept responsibility for your own actions, do not complain it away. And then let me close with waking up. The idea is to stick with your commitment. Even if, the hardest part is changing, taking this off. I know that the next time I complain, I'm going to probably make something that's going to be a double complaint. That I have to move it because I'm upset that I had to do it. But I'll do it because I'm so excited that I made it to day 4. Because you would have asked me that 2 weeks ago, I couldn't get past 1. So I know that day 21 is possible. It may take 4 months, but I'm willing to do it because it's making a change. And I encourage all of you to do that because it'll make a change. So the closing story about you won't get there if you put the bracelet in the drawer is there was a monk. He joined an order. That was absolute silence. Nobody was allowed to talk unless the abbot gave you special permission. So the monk joins, and he's there for 5 years. And finally the abbot comes to him and he says, you've been here 5 years, so now you're allowed to say 2 words. What is it that you would like to say? The young monk thought about it for a while and he said, bed hard. And the abbot said, okay, well, we'll see what we can do about that. So they went on for another 5 years, and the abbot came to him and he said, it's been another 5 years, you can say 2 more words, what would you like to say? The abbot thought about it. I mean, the monk thought about it, and he says, cold food. And the abbot said, oh, okay, well, let's see what we can do about that. And he goes away, and he comes back 5 years later, and he says to the monk, it's been 15 years. You can say 2 words now. What is it? The monk says, I quit. And the abbot says, you might as well. All you've done is complain since you've been here. Thank you.